Chapter 1 Sun Tzu, the man who understood conflict more than 2,500 years ago in a world divided by war. One man studied a question that continues to challenge humanity today. Why do powerful people make decisions that lead to destruction? At a time when kingdoms fought for survival, when rulers measured their strength through armies and territory, one strategist saw something deeper. He understood that the greatest battles were not always won by the strongest. They were won by those who understood reality better than their opponents. His name was Sun Tzu, and the small book he left behind would become one of the most influential works on strategy ever written. Sun Tzu's The Art of War is often described as a military text, a manual about battles, a guide for generals. But this description only captures the surface. The deeper lesson was never only about war, it was about human behavior. It was about decision-making under pressure, understanding opponents, controlling emotions, using resources wisely, creating advantage before conflict begins. War was simply the environment where these principles became impossible to ignore. Sun Tzu lived during China's Warring States period. It was an age of constant competition. Different kingdoms fought for survival. Rulers competed for influence. Generals searched for advantage. One mistake could destroy a nation. One wrong decision could cost thousands of lives. In such a world, strategy was not a theory, it was survival. A commander who misunderstood the enemy could lose everything. A ruler who acted emotionally could destroy his own kingdom. A leader who failed to understand reality would eventually be defeated by reality. This created Sun Tzu's first great lesson. Strength alone does not guarantee victory. A larger army can lose. A richer nation can fail. A powerful leader can make disastrous decisions. Why? Because power without wisdom is dangerous. A person with strength may win a battle, but a person with strategy can create conditions where the battle is already decided before it begins. This is why Sun Tzu believed the greatest victories were achieved before fighting started. The weak strategist asks, "How do I defeat my opponent?" The great strategist asks, "How do I create a situation where success becomes likely and unnecessary conflict becomes avoidable?" This changed the meaning of victory. Victory was no longer only about destruction. It became about preparation, intelligence, timing, positioning, psychology. Thousands of years later, this principle remains visible everywhere. A president negotiating with another nation, a company competing in a global market, a military commander planning operations, a person trying to succeed in life, all face the same fundamental challenge. Understand the situation before making the move. One of Sun Tzu's most famous teachings states, "Know yourself and know your enemy." These few words contain one of the deepest lessons in human strategy. Many people study their opponents, they analyze their competitors, they search for weaknesses outside themselves, but they fail to study the most important person, themselves. A strategist must ask, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What assumptions am I making? What information might I be missing? What emotions could influence my judgment? Because the greatest enemy is sometimes not outside, sometimes it is inside. History repeatedly shows that leaders often fail, not because they lacked intelligence. They fail because they misunderstood themselves. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of history's greatest military minds. He understood movement, organization, and battlefield strategy. He defeated powerful opponents and built one of the strongest empires in Europe. But the same confidence that helped him rise eventually became dangerous. Success created certainty. Certainty reduced caution. And reduced caution created vulnerability. This is one of history's greatest warnings. A strength that is not controlled can eventually become a weakness. This idea connects deeply with psychologist Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. Jung argued that every person carries hidden parts of themselves. Fears, insecurities, weaknesses, desires they refuse to acknowledge. A person who understands these hidden parts gains self-awareness. A person who ignores them may become controlled by them. For leaders, this becomes even more important. A leader who fears appearing weak may become obsessed with proving strength. A leader who cannot accept criticism may surround himself with agreement. A leader who needs admiration may protect his image instead of protecting the mission. This is why strategy begins with self-mastery. Before attempting to control events outside yourself, you must first understand what is happening inside yourself. Robert Greene, in his writings about power and strategy, explores a similar principle. Power is not only about resources, it is about understanding human nature. People are influenced by reputation, perception, incentives, fear, ambition. A leader who understands human behavior has an advantage. A leader who misunderstands human behavior becomes vulnerable. But perhaps Sun Tzu's greatest lesson is this. The purpose of strategy is not simply to defeat an enemy. It is to create the best possible outcome. Many people misunderstand power. They believe power means forcing others to surrender. But the greatest strategist understands something different. The best victory is often the one that avoids unnecessary destruction. The world today looks completely different from the world of Sun Tzu. Modern leaders do not only command armies. They command economies, technology, information, alliances, influence. The battlefield has expanded, but human nature has not changed. The same emotions that influenced ancient kings influence modern leaders. The same mistakes that destroyed ancient rulers can destroy modern ones. So, after more than 2,000 years, Sun Tzu's questions remain. Do you understand yourself? Do you understand your opponent? Do you understand the consequences of your decisions? Can you control yourself when pressure rises? Because the greatest battlefield has never been only outside. It has always been within. And before we examine the leaders of the modern world, we must first understand the invisible force that shapes every decision made by those who hold power. The psychology of power. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Power. The invisible battlefield inside every leader. Power has fascinated humanity throughout history. Kings fought for it. Empires were built around it. Generals sacrificed everything to obtain it. Politicians competed endlessly to control it. But history reveals a deeper truth. The hardest part of power is not gaining it. It is remaining wise after obtaining it. Power changes the environment around a person. A person with little influence usually receives direct feedback. People tell them when they are wrong. Their mistakes are visible. Their weaknesses are easier to recognize. But as someone rises higher, something begins to change. People become more careful. Criticism becomes less common. Disagreement becomes more difficult. The leader begins hearing more voices saying, "You are right. Your decisions are correct. You understand better than others." This creates one of the greatest dangers of leadership. A powerful person can slowly lose contact with reality. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack information, but because the environment around them begins protecting their confidence. The ancient world understood this problem. Kings surrounded themselves with advisors who feared speaking honestly. Emperors listened to praise while ignoring warnings. Generals became convinced that previous victories guaranteed future success. The world has changed. Human psychology has not. The illusion created by success. One of the most dangerous moments for a leader is not failure. It is repeated success. Success creates confidence. Confidence creates belief. And belief can slowly become certainty. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, in his research on human decision-making, demonstrated that even intelligent people are vulnerable to predictable errors. One of the most dangerous is overconfidence. People often believe they understand situations better than they actually do. They underestimate uncertainty, complexity, unexpected consequences. For ordinary people, these mistakes may affect personal decisions. For powerful leaders, the consequences can affect millions. A wrong decision from a person with limited influence may hurt a few people. A wrong decision from a powerful leader can affect economies, nations, generation. This is why leadership requires more than intelligence. It requires humility. Then Carl Jung and the shadow of power. Carl Jung introduced one of the most important ideas in psychology, the shadow. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we do not want to acknowledge. Our fears, insecurities, weaknesses, hidden motivations. Jung believed that people who refuse to understand their shadow can eventually become controlled by it. This idea is extremely important when studying leaders. A leader who fears appearing weak may become obsessed with displaying strength. A leader who cannot accept criticism may see disagreement as betrayal. A leader who needs constant admiration may surround himself with people who only provide approval. Eventually, something dangerous happens. The leader stops protecting the mission. The leader starts protecting the image. The question changes from, what is the correct decision, to how do I prove that I was right. This is one of the greatest threats to strategy, because strategy requires reality, but ego requires victory. The problem of information. Sun Tzu understood that information was one of the greatest sources of advantage. A commander without accurate information is fighting blindly. This principle is even more important today. Modern leaders have access to intelligence reports, experts, technology, data, global communication. Yet information alone does not guarantee wisdom. The most important question is, does the leader receive the truth? A leader can have thousands of reports and still be blind. Why? Because information can be filtered. People may hide problems, officials may exaggerate success, advisors may avoid uncomfortable truths. A powerful person does not only need loyal people, a powerful person needs honest people. This was one of Abraham Lincoln's greatest strengths. During the American Civil War, Lincoln surrounded himself with people who challenged him. He understood that advisors were not meant to protect his feelings. They were meant to improve his decisions. The danger of emotional leadership. Sun Tzu understood that emotions can destroy strategy. A commander controlled by anger becomes predictable. A commander controlled by fear becomes hesitant. A commander controlled by pride becomes careless. The same principle applies to modern leadership. Every leader experiences criticism, pressure, opposition, failure. The question is not whether emotions exist. The question is who controls the emotions. A weak leader allows emotions to control decisions. A disciplined leader recognizes emotions but does not surrender judgment to them. This connects with Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most powerful emperors, wrote extensively about mastering one's own mind. He understood that the person who cannot govern himself cannot truly govern others. How power reveals character. Power does not always transform people. Often it reveals what was already inside them. A disciplined person may use power responsibly. An insecure person may use power to protect themselves. A wise person may use power to create something lasting. A person controlled by ego may use power to dominate. This is why understanding leadership requires understanding psychology. Before asking, what decisions did this leader make, we must ask, what kind of person was making those decisions? Because every strategy comes from a mind, and every mind contains strength, weaknesses, fears, biases. The first battlefield of leadership is not the opponent, it is the self. Before examining modern leaders and their strategies, we must understand one final question. How do personal experiences shape the way leaders see the world? Why does a businessman approach problems differently from an intelligence officer? Why does a system builder think differently from a negotiator? Because before leaders shape history, history shapes leaders. Chapter 3: The Making of Modern Strategists. How experience shapes the way leaders see the world. Every leader has a story before they have power. Before someone sits in a position of influence, before they command institutions, before their decisions affect millions of people, they are shaped by experiences most of the world never sees. Childhood, family, education, hardship, success, failure. All of these experiences create a mental framework. And that framework influences how a leader understands conflict, negotiation, risk, opportunity, enemies, allies. A leader does not see the world exactly as it is. A leader sees the world through the lens created by their experiences. This is one of the most important ideas in understanding power. Two leaders can face the same situation and reach completely different conclusions because they have different internal maps of reality. A businessman may see the world as a negotiation. An intelligence officer may see the world as a competition of hidden interests. A system builder may see the world as an organization that must be strengthened over time. None of these perspectives is automatically right or wrong, but every perspective creates both a strength and a weakness. Because every way of seeing the world reveals certain things while hiding others. Donald Trump, the world as negotiation. Donald Trump developed his leadership approach through the world of business, real estate, and public communication. Born in 1946 in Queens, New York, he grew up in a family involved in property development. His father, Fred Trump, worked in a competitive environment where success depended on negotiation, reputation, competition, understanding, opportunities. From an early stage, Trump was exposed to a worldview where success meant creating advantage. The question was not only, what resources do I have? The question was, what leverage do I possess? This idea became central to his approach. A person with leverage has options. A person without leverage has fewer choices. In his business writings, Trump describes negotiation as a process involving understanding the other side, creating advantage, projecting confidence, seeking favorable outcomes. This connects with Robert Greene's ideas about power. Human beings do not respond only to reality. They also respond to perception. A person who appears strong may influence how others behave. A person who appears uncertain may invite pressure. This mindset shaped Trump's leadership style. He often approaches challenges through the lens of negotiation. What does the other side want? What pressure can change behavior? How can I improve my position? This approach has strengths. A leader willing to challenge established patterns can expose weaknesses in existing systems. A leader willing to create pressure can force discussions that may otherwise never happen. But every strength has a hidden danger. The business world and international politics operate differently. A business negotiation usually involves a transaction-specific interests, a possible agreement. International politics involves history, identity, security, concerns, alliances, long-term consequences. Not every conflict can be solved like a business negotiation. The strategic question becomes, can a negotiation mindset succeed when the other side is not simply seeking a deal? Vladimir Putin, the world as strategic competition. Vladimir Putin developed a very different worldview. Born in 1952 in Leningrad, Soviet Union, he grew up during a period shaped by the memory of World War II and the Cold War. For many people of that generation, national security was not an abstract idea. It was connected to survival, sacrifice, and historical experience. From a young age, Putin developed an interest in discipline and martial arts. He is often referred to lessons from judo. Patience, balance, understanding opponents, using an opponent's movements strategically. These ideas reflect a particular way of thinking. Do not always confront strength directly. Understand the situation. Create position. Wait for opportunity. His career in the Soviet Security Service, the KGB, further shaped this worldview. Intelligence work trains people to think about hidden motivations, uncertainty, information, strategic advantage. A person shaped by intelligence may naturally ask, what is happening beneath the surface? What are the real interests? What does the opponent actually want? This creates strengths. Such a leader may focus heavily on preparation, information, long-term positioning, but this worldview also has risks. If every situation is viewed primarily as competition, opportunities for cooperation may become harder to recognize. The strategist must always ask, is this truly a battlefield? Or is another approach possible? Xi Jinping. The world as a system. Xi Jinping represents another model of power. Born in 1953, Xi grew up during a period of major transformation in China. His father, Xi Jinping, was a senior Communist Party official. However, during the Cultural Revolution, his family experienced political upheaval. Xi was later sent to rural China as part of the sent-down youth movement. This period exposed him to hardship and rural life. It became part of the narrative surrounding his leadership philosophy. The importance of discipline, endurance, organization, long-term development. Unlike a negotiator who focuses on individual interactions, or an intelligence officer who focuses on strategic competition, the system builder sees power differently. Power comes from organization. A strong system can coordinate resources, execute plans, maintain direction, pursue goals over decades. This approach has clear advantages. Large goals require large systems, infrastructure, technology, industrial development, national projects. These cannot depend only on one person's ability. They require coordination. But every strength contains a weakness. A highly organized system faces a critical question. How does truth reach the top? A leader may have a powerful machine, but if that machine hides problems, the leader may make decisions based on incomplete information. 3 leaders, 3 strategic lenses. Now we can see 3 different ways of understanding power. Donald Trump: power through negotiation, pressure, communication, disruption, strength, creating movement, risk, turning every challenge into confrontation. Vladimir Putin: power through patience, intelligence, positioning, endurance, strength, long-term strategic thinking, risk, becoming trapped by a chosen path. Xi Jinping: power through systems, discipline, planning, organization, strength, long-term execution, risk, reduced flexibility and information challenges. The deeper lesson is not about choosing one model. The deeper lesson is understanding that every leader carries a worldview created by experience. The most important question for any strategist is, does my way of seeing the world help me understand reality, or does it prevent me from seeing what I do not want to see? Because history's greatest strategists were not only those who understood their opponents, they understood themselves. Now we move from personality to action. Because leadership is ultimately tested not by beliefs, speeches, or intentions. It is tested by decisions. And the next chapter examines the first modern case study. Donald Trump, the strategy of disruption, pressure, and negotiation. Prandran Chapter 4, Donald Trump. The strategy of disruption, pressure, and negotiation. Throughout history, some leaders rise by protecting existing systems. They preserve traditions. They maintain institutions. They move carefully within established rules. But others rise by challenging the system itself. They enter by saying, the old way is not working. They question assumptions. They break patterns. They create disruption. Donald Trump represents this type of leadership. A leadership style built around negotiation, pressure, communication, unpredictability, challenging established structures. The strategic question is not simply whether disruption is good or bad. The deeper question is, when does disruption become a powerful strategy, and when does it become a source of instability? The power of the outsider. One reason disruptive leaders gain influence is because they identify dissatisfaction within a system. Every society develops frustrations. People become concerned about economic changes, political decisions, institutions, cultural shifts. A disruptor enters this environment and offers a different message. The system needs to change. From a strategic perspective, this creates an advantage. A leader who understands dissatisfaction can connect with people who feel ignored. Robert Greene's writings on power highlight an important principle. People are influenced not only by facts. They are influenced by emotions, fears, hopes, desires for change. A successful strategist understands what motivates people before trying to influence them. Communication as a strategic weapon. One of Trump's most significant abilities has been understanding the importance of attention. In the modern world, attention itself has become a battlefield. The person who controls the conversation can influence what people focus on. Traditional leaders often depended on institutions and established media channels. Modern leaders can communicate directly with millions of people. This changes the nature of power. A message can shape public debate, influence public opinion, pressure opponents, mobilize supporters within moments. Trump mastered this environment. Whether people supported or criticized him, he remained central in public discussion. Strategically, this demonstrates a modern reality. Visibility creates influence. But Sun Tzu would ask a deeper question. Attention toward what purpose? A strategist does not seek attention simply to be noticed. Attention must serve an objective. Because there is a danger. A leader can win the battle for attention while losing the larger strategic goal. Negotiation and the use of leverage. A central part of Trump's leadership philosophy is negotiation. The principle is, create leverage before entering the discussion. A negotiator with leverage has more options. They can increase pressure, create alternatives, influence the opponent's calculations. This connects with Sun Tzu's principle. A wise commander creates advantage before conflict begins. Strength is not only the ability to fight. Strength is the ability to shape the situation. The China strategy, economic competition as a battlefield. One of the defining strategic challenges during Trump's presidency was the relationship between the United States and China. The competition involved trade, technology, manufacturing, global influence. The approach was based on pressure. The strategic belief was economic costs could encourage negotiation and change. From a Sun Tzu perspective, the important question is, did the strategy create the desired conditions? Because every strategic move creates a reaction. A strategist cannot only ask. The strategist must ask, what response will this create? An opponent is not passive. The opponent adapts. They search for alternatives. They develop counter-strategies. This is one of the oldest lessons of conflict. A strategy must consider the second move and the third move, and the consequences beyond the immediate victory. The Iran question, pressure without losing control. The relationship between the United States and Iran provides another example of strategic pressure. The challenge was, how do you create pressure without creating a conflict that becomes impossible to control? A leader may begin with clear objectives, prevent a threat, increase bargaining power, force negotiations, but international politics is complex. Other actors respond. New risks appear. Unexpected consequences emerge. Sun Tzu warned against entering conflicts without understanding the full environment. A strategist must consider not only how a conflict begins, but how it ends. The question is, can pressure create a better outcome? Or can pressure create a situation where everyone becomes trapped? Ukraine and the complexity of negotiation. The Russia-Ukraine conflict represents one of the most difficult strategic challenges in modern leadership. A leader attempting to influence the outcome must consider many actors. Russia, Ukraine, NATO members, regional security interests, global economic consequences. Modern conflicts are rarely controlled by one person. A leader may influence events, but cannot always determine every outcome. This returns to Sun Tzu's central lesson: understand the environment. A strategy is incomplete if it only considers what one side wants. A strategist must understand, what will others do? How will alliances react? What happens after the decision? The strengths of the disruptor. The disruptive leadership model has important strengths. 1. Challenging complacency. Systems can become comfortable. They resist change. A disruptor forces questions that others avoid. 2. Creating pressure. A leader willing to challenge expectations can create negotiating leverage. 3. Understanding modern communication in an information-driven world. Communication itself is strategic power. The risks of disruption, but disruption carries dangers. Risk 1. Too many battles. Sun Tzu warned that a commander who fights everywhere weakens himself. Resources are limited. Attention is limited. Energy is limited. A leader must ask, is this battle important, or is it distracting from the larger objective? Risk 2. Turning strategy into personal conflict. The strategist must separate the mission from the ego. A disagreement becomes dangerous when the goal changes from achieving an outcome to defeating another person. Risk 3. Short-term wins versus long-term success. Winning today's argument does not always mean winning tomorrow's strategy. The greatest victories are measured by consequences, not applause, not headlines, not immediate reactions. The strategic lesson of Donald Trump. The Trump case study reveals an important lesson about modern power. Disruption can create influence. Pressure can create leverage. Communication can create power. But strategy requires control. A tool becomes dangerous when the user loses control of it. A hammer can build a house. The same hammer can destroy one. The difference is the person holding it. The lesson is not that disruption is always right or wrong. The lesson is, disruption is a strategy. It is not a substitute for strategy. A leader must know when to challenge, when to negotiate, when to compromise, when to move forward, when to step back. The next chapter examines a completely different model of power. Not disruption, not public pressure. Instead, patience, positioning, endurance. The strategy of Vladimir Putin. Jung, Chapter 5. Vladimir Putin. The strategy of endurance, positioning, and the long game. Not every strategist seeks quick victories. Some understand that time itself can become a weapon. Throughout history, the most patient leaders have often defeated stronger opponents simply because they understood something others did not. The person who controls time often controls the outcome. While some leaders seek immediate results, others are willing to wait. They build influence slowly. They strengthen their position quietly. They calculate rather than react. This is the strategic model often associated with Vladimir Putin. It is a model built on patience, positioning, endurance, strategic calculation. The central question is not whether patience is always good. The deeper question is, when does patience become wisdom, and when does commitment to a strategy become a trap? Thinking beyond today's headlines, one of the greatest differences between tactical thinkers and strategic thinkers is time. A tactical thinker asks, what solves today's problem? A strategist asks, what position will this decision create 5 or 10 years from now? Sun Tzu repeatedly emphasized preparation over reaction. He believed that great commanders shaped events before events shaped them. They were not driven by urgency. They were driven by purpose. This is why patience is often misunderstood. Patience is not doing nothing. Patience is preparing while others are reacting. The formation of a strategic mindset. To understand Putin's leadership style, we must first understand the environment that shaped him. He was born in 1952 in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, only a few years after one of the most devastating wars in human history. The Soviet Union carried deep memories of invasion, sacrifice, and survival. National security was not simply discussed in books, it was woven into everyday life. As a young man, Putin became deeply interested in judo. Many people see martial arts as physical training, but experienced practitioners know they are equally about psychology. Judo teaches lessons that sound remarkably similar to Sun Tzu. Remain balanced, stay patient, do not waste energy. Use your opponent's movement, never attack blindly. These ideas became part of a mindset that values positioning over impulse. Later, Putin joined the KGB, the Soviet Union's intelligence service. Whether one agrees or disagrees with the political system, intelligence work develops a particular way of thinking. It teaches people to ask questions that others may overlook. Who benefits? What information is missing? What assumptions are being made? What is happening beneath the surface? This way of thinking encourages caution. It discourages simple explanations. It assumes that major events usually involve multiple layers of motivation. The strategy of position one of Sun Tzu's greatest teachings is that battles are often decided before they begin. This idea depends on positioning. A commander who enters battle from a position of strength has already increased the probability of success. The same principle applies to nations. Countries constantly seek stronger strategic positions through geography, alliances, military readiness, economic relationships, diplomatic influence. Power is rarely static. It is constantly being shaped by positioning. This is one reason international politics often appears slow. Many important strategic moves happen years before their consequences become visible. Ukraine. A strategic case study. No discussion of Putin's leadership can ignore the war in Ukraine. It is one of the defining geopolitical events of the 21st century. But rather than asking only political questions, let us examine it as students of strategy. Every major decision begins with assumptions. A leader must estimate, how determined is the opponent? How will allies respond? How long might the conflict last? What economic consequences will follow? What happens if events unfold differently than expected? These are the same kinds of questions Sun Tzu believed every commander must answer before acting. Because wars are rarely won by courage alone, they are won by accurate judgment. One of history's recurring lessons is that conflicts often last longer than leaders initially expect. Military historians have observed this pattern repeatedly. Political leaders, generals, and governments across different centuries have underestimated resistance, logistics, economic costs, international reactions. This is not unique to one country. It is one of humanity's oldest strategic mistakes. The danger of commitment. One of the hardest decisions for any leader is recognizing when circumstances have changed. Imagine investing years into a strategy. Resources have been committed. Reputation is involved. The world is watching. Changing direction suddenly becomes psychologically difficult. This is known in psychology as escalation of commitment. People continue investing in previous decisions because abandoning them feels like admitting failure. But strategy demands something different. Sun Tzu teaches loyalty to reality, not loyalty to ego. The strategist must continually ask, does this plan still serve the objective? Or am I now serving the plan? There is an enormous difference. Information and isolation. Every powerful leader faces another challenge. The higher someone rises, the fewer people are willing to deliver uncomfortable truths. People begin protecting the leader, sometimes out of loyalty, sometimes out of fear, sometimes because they believe good news is more welcome than bad news. History repeatedly demonstrates the danger of this environment. A leader may possess enormous military resources, experienced advisors, advanced technology, yet still fail because critical information never reaches the top. Sun Tzu considered intelligence one of the greatest strategic assets. But intelligence only has value when it reflects reality. False confidence is one of the most expensive mistakes any leader can make. The strengths of endurance. The endurance model possesses genuine strengths. Patient leaders are less likely to make decisions driven by temporary emotions. Strategic consistency. Long-term thinking allows leaders to pursue objectives that require years rather than weeks. Resistance to external pressure. Leaders who think long-term are often less influenced by daily criticism or temporary setbacks. These qualities have helped many successful leaders throughout history. The hidden weakness, yet every strength creates a shadow. Patience can become stubbornness. Consistency can become rigidity. Commitment can become inability to adapt. The strategist must remember another lesson from Sun Tzu. Circumstances change, the environment changes, opponents change. Strategy must also evolve. The greatest strategist is not the one who never changes direction. It is the one who recognizes the right moment to change. The lesson from Putin, the Putin case study, teaches an important principle. Time is one of the most powerful weapons in strategy. Patience creates opportunities. Preparation creates leverage. Positioning creates influence. But time alone does not guarantee success. A strategy must remain connected to reality. A leader must continually reassess assumptions. A plan that cannot adapt eventually becomes vulnerable. Sun Tzu understood this more than 2,000 years ago. The strongest tree can be broken by a storm, but water survives because it adapts. The next leader represents an entirely different philosophy. Instead of disruption, instead of endurance, he believes that the greatest source of national power lies in something else, building institutions that outlast individuals. The next chapter explores Xi Jinping, the strategy of systems, discipline, and long-term national power. Chapter 6: Xi Jinping, the strategy of systems, discipline, and long-term national power. History remembers great leaders for many reasons. Some are remembered for winning wars, others for inspiring revolutions. Some transform nations through bold speeches or decisive battles. But there is another kind of leader whose influence is measured differently. They are remembered for building systems that continue functioning long after individual decisions have faded from memory. This is the strategic model most closely associated with Xi Jinping. Rather than focusing primarily on disruption or endurance, this approach emphasizes long-term planning, institutional strength, discipline, organization, national development. The central strategic question is lasting power created by extraordinary individuals or by extraordinary systems? The leader and the system. Throughout history, civilizations that depended entirely on one remarkable leader often struggled after that leader was gone. By contrast, societies with strong institutions were often better able to withstand crises, leadership transitions, and external pressure. Sun Tzu understood that victory was never simply about the courage of one commander. Victory depended on preparation, logistics, discipline, communication, and organization. An army without structure could collapse, no matter how brave its soldiers were. The same principle applies to nations. Strong leadership can solve today's problems. Strong institutions can solve problems for generations. A life shaped by upheaval. Xi Jinping was born in 1953 into a politically influential family. His father, Xi Jinping, was a senior official in the Chinese Communist Party. Yet influence did not guarantee stability. During the Cultural Revolution, his family fell from political favor. Xi himself was sent to rural Shaanxi province as part of China's sent-down youth movement, where many young people were required to live and work in the countryside. Those years exposed him to hardship, physical labor, and a very different reality from the political circles in which he had been born. Whether one views this experience positively or negatively, it undoubtedly shaped his understanding of resilience, discipline, and long-term perseverance. Many biographers argue that this period influenced his belief that enduring hardship can strengthen both individuals and institutions. Thinking in decades instead of election cycles. One of the defining characteristics often attributed to Xi's leadership is long-term planning. Many democratic governments operate within election cycles. Leaders must often think about what can be achieved in 4 or 5 years. This can encourage short-term decision-making. A system without regular national elections operates under different incentives. Its leaders may have greater ability to pursue projects that require decades rather than years. Examples include large-scale infrastructure, industrial development, technological investment, long-term education strategies, national manufacturing capacity, regardless of one's political views. This difference in time horizon significantly affects strategic planning. Sun Tzu repeatedly emphasized preparation. Preparation often produces results that are invisible in the present but decisive in the future. The Belt and Road Initiative, strategy through connectivity. One of the most ambitious examples of long-term planning under Xi Jinping has been the Belt and Road Initiative. The project seeks to expand transportation, trade, and infrastructure connections across Asia, Africa, Europe, and other regions. Supporters argue that it promotes economic development, improves connectivity, and creates new opportunities for trade and investment. Critics raise concerns about debt sustainability, geopolitical influence, and the long-term implications for participating countries. From a strategic perspective, however, the initiative illustrates an important principle. Influence is not created only through military strength. It can also be built through roads, ports, railways, energy networks, trade relationships, financial partnerships. Sun Tzu wrote that the highest form of strategy is to achieve objectives with minimal conflict. Economic relationships can sometimes create influence more effectively than direct confrontation. Technology as strategic power. In the 21st century, technological capability has become one of the primary sources of national power. Artificial intelligence, semiconductors, telecommunications, cybersecurity, quantum computing. These are no longer simply scientific fields, they are strategic assets. Under Xi's leadership, China has invested heavily in developing domestic technological capabilities. The objective has been to reduce dependence on external suppliers while strengthening innovation within the country. Again, observers differ on the effectiveness and broader implications of these policies. But strategically, the lesson is clear. A nation that controls critical technologies possesses greater strategic independence. Sun Tzu might describe technology today as another form of high ground. The side that controls it gains options before conflict even begins. The strength of organization. Every successful organization, whether an army, a corporation, or a nation, depends upon coordination. Individual talent is valuable, but talent without organization often produces inconsistent results. Consider a football team. Having the world's best striker is not enough. Without defenders, midfielders, coaches, medical staff, and coordinated tactics, the team will struggle. The same applies to nations. Systems transform individual effort into collective strength. Xi's leadership philosophy frequently emphasizes organizational discipline and centralized coordination. The underlying belief is that a well-organized system can pursue national objectives more consistently than one driven primarily by individual personalities. The challenge of centralization. Yet every strategic model carries risks. The same structures that improve coordination can also create vulnerabilities. One of the greatest questions any centralized system must answer is, how does honest information travel upward? Large organizations naturally develop hierarchies. As information passes through each level, it can become filtered. Mistakes may be minimized, successes may be exaggerated, problems may be delayed. Sun Tzu considered accurate intelligence indispensable. If information becomes distorted before reaching decision makers, even the strongest system can make poor strategic choices. History offers many examples of governments, corporations, and military organizations that underestimated problems because critical information never reached those responsible for making decisions. The danger is not unique to any one country. It is a universal challenge of leadership. Stability versus adaptability. There is another strategic tension. Strong systems provide stability, but environments constantly change. Markets change, technology changes, international relationships change, public expectations change. A system that cannot adapt eventually begins solving yesterday's problems instead of tomorrow's. Sun Tzu repeatedly emphasized flexibility. He compared successful commanders to water. Water does not resist reality. It adjusts to the shape of the ground while continuing toward its destination. The lesson is profound. Discipline is essential. Organization is powerful. Planning is necessary, but adaptability remains indispensable. The lesson from Xi Jinping, the Xi case study, teaches us that enduring power is often built long before dramatic events capture the world's attention. Roads are built years before they carry trade. Schools educate children long before those children become innovators. Research laboratories begin work decades before technological breakthroughs emerge. Strong institutions rarely produce immediate headlines. They produce long-term capacity. At the same time, every system must guard against complacency. Every institution must ensure that truth can reach those making decisions. Every leader must remember that organization without adaptability eventually becomes rigidity. Sun Tzu's wisdom echoes once again. The purpose of strategy is not merely to become strong. It is to remain effective as circumstances change. Having examined three very different leadership models, we can now step back and ask a broader question. The battlefield itself has changed. Wars are no longer fought only with soldiers and tanks. Power now flows through information technology, finance, public opinion, and digital networks. To understand modern strategy, we must first understand the new battlefield. That is where we turn next. Chapter 7, The New Battlefield. Information, technology, and the war for the human mind. If Sun Tzu were alive today, he would immediately recognize one profound truth. The battlefield has changed, but human nature has not. The weapons are different, the speed is different, the technology is different, yet the struggle remains the same. It is still a contest over perception, decision-making, influence, and power. Only now, the most valuable territory is often not land, it is the human mind. For thousands of years, nations fought to control mountains, rivers, ports, and trade routes. Today, countries still compete over geography, but they also compete over something far less visible: information. Who controls it? Who spreads it? Who believes it? Who questions it? Sun Tzu wrote, "All warfare is based on deception." This sentence is often misunderstood. He was not celebrating dishonesty. He was warning that conflict is filled with incomplete information, uncertainty, and attempts to influence an opponent's perception. A commander who believes everything he sees becomes vulnerable. A commander who questions, verifies, and understands information gains an advantage. That principle has never been more relevant than it is today. Information has become strategic power. In the modern world, information moves faster than armies. A message written in one country can reach millions of people across the world in seconds. A single photograph, a short video, a headline, a speech, a rumor, each has the potential to influence public opinion before governments have even responded. Power is no longer measured only by military strength. It is also measured by the ability to shape narratives. Who tells the story? Whose version becomes accepted? Whose interpretation influences public opinion? These questions now carry enormous strategic importance. Throughout history, leaders understood that controlling communication could strengthen their position. Today, the scale is unprecedented. Social media platforms, television, online news, artificial intelligence, digital advertising, cyber operations. Each has become part of the modern strategic landscape. Attention is the world's most valuable resource. Economists often speak about scarce resources: gold, oil, land, energy. But in the digital age, another scarce resource has become increasingly valuable: attention. Every government, every corporation, every political movement, every media organization, every content creator competes for one limited resource: your attention. The more attention a message receives, the more influence it may acquire. This is why emotionally charged stories often spread faster than careful analysis. Fear travels quickly, outrage spreads rapidly, complexity moves slowly. Daniel Kahneman explained that the human brain often relies on fast thinking. When people are under pressure, emotionally engaged, or overloaded with information, they tend to make quicker judgments using mental shortcuts. These shortcuts help us function, but they also make us more vulnerable to manipulation. Sun Tzu would likely recognize this immediately. A strategist who understands how people process information gains influence long before any physical conflict begins. The digital battlefield. Modern competition increasingly occurs in cyberspace. Governments invest heavily in cybersecurity. Companies protect intellectual property. Nations compete over technological leadership. Critical infrastructure depends on digital systems. A cyber attack may never involve a single soldier crossing a border, yet it can disrupt hospitals, financial institutions, transportation systems, communication networks, energy supplies. The battlefield now includes invisible front lines. Victory may depend on algorithms rather than artillery, software rather than swords, data rather than distance. This does not mean traditional military power has disappeared. It means strategy has expanded. Modern leaders must think across multiple domains simultaneously: military, economic, technological, diplomatic, informational, artificial intelligence, and strategic competition. Artificial intelligence has introduced another transformation. AI can analyze vast amounts of information faster than humans. It can assist scientific research, improve logistics, support medical discoveries, enhance manufacturing, strengthen defense planning. Yet every powerful technology presents difficult questions. How should it be governed? Who controls it? How should societies balance innovation with responsibility? These questions are now central to strategic competition among nations. Sun Tzu believed that knowledge created advantage. Artificial intelligence increases humanity's ability to generate knowledge. But knowledge alone is not wisdom. A machine can process information. Only people decide how that information will be used. 3 leaders, 3 information strategies. The leadership models we examined earlier also reveal different approaches to information. Donald Trump demonstrated the importance of direct communication. He frequently bypassed traditional media channels and spoke directly to the public. Supporters viewed this as transparency. Critics argued that it could intensify polarization. Regardless of perspective, it demonstrated that modern leaders can communicate without relying exclusively on established institutions. Vladimir Putin's leadership has often emphasized information control, strategic messaging, and national security considerations. Supporters argue that strong information management can contribute to stability during periods of conflict. Critics contend that limiting independent information reduces transparency and public accountability. The strategic lesson is that information itself has become an arena of competition. Xi Jinping's leadership places significant emphasis on digital infrastructure, technological development, and information governance. Supporters argue this strengthens national coordination and long-term planning. Critics express concerns about freedom of expression and centralized information management. Again, regardless of political perspective, information has become central to statecraft. Different leaders choose different approaches, but every approach recognizes the same reality. Information is power. The responsibility of citizens. The modern battlefield is unique because ordinary people participate in it every day. Every time we share an article, comment on a post, watch a video, forward a message, we become part of the global information ecosystem. This creates a new responsibility. Sun Tzu taught that a wise commander gathers reliable intelligence before acting. Modern citizens should apply the same principle: before believing, verify; before sharing, investigate; before reacting, pause. A false story can influence elections, damage reputations, increase social tension, or deepen international conflict. Truth has become a strategic asset. The greatest victory, one of Sun Tzu's most quoted ideas, is that the highest form of victory is to achieve one's objective without prolonged conflict. In today's world, influence often succeeds where force fails. Ideas can cross borders that armies cannot. Technology can reshape societies more profoundly than weapons. Economic relationships can alter history without firing a shot. The battlefield has expanded beyond geography. It now includes education, research, innovation, culture, finance, media, technology, and above all, human perception. The lesson of the new battlefield: the strategist of the 21st century must understand far more than military power. They must understand psychology, economics, technology, communication, cybersecurity, public opinion, artificial intelligence, global interdependence. The greatest danger today is not simply having too little information. It is being overwhelmed by information while losing the ability to distinguish truth from noise. Sun Tzu's wisdom becomes even more valuable in such a world. The leader who understands reality more clearly than everyone else possesses an extraordinary advantage. Because strategy has never been about knowing everything. It has always been about knowing what matters. History teaches a sobering lesson. Many powerful leaders have mastered armies. Many have mastered politics. Some have mastered technology. But very few have mastered themselves. And that is where the greatest victories and the greatest failures begin. In the next chapter, we leave the modern world for a moment and return to history. Because before we can understand how great leaders succeed, we must understand why so many of them eventually fall. Pat papped, or 8 when great leaders fall. The 7 strategic mistakes that destroy power. History has a cruel sense of irony. The qualities that help a leader rise are often the same qualities that eventually lead to their downfall. Confidence becomes arrogance. Discipline becomes rigidity. Patience becomes hesitation. Boldness becomes recklessness. Throughout history, countless leaders have climbed to extraordinary heights, only to lose what they spent decades building. This raises an important question. Why do intelligent, experienced, and powerful leaders continue to make predictable mistakes? Sun Tzu believed that victory begins with understanding reality. The tragedy is that many leaders stop seeing reality clearly precisely when they become the most powerful. Mistake 1. Believing your own success. Success is one of the most dangerous experiences a leader can have. Failure often teaches humility. Success often teaches certainty. The more victories a leader accumulates, the easier it becomes to believe that future victories are inevitable. This is the illusion of invincibility. Napoleon Bonaparte is one of history's greatest examples. His military genius transformed Europe. Campaign after campaign ended in remarkable victories. His confidence was not imaginary. It had been earned. But confidence slowly evolved into certainty. When he launched the invasion of Russia in 1812, he underestimated the immense challenges posed by geography, logistics, weather, and sustained resistance. The campaign became one of history's most devastating military disasters. Napoleon did not suddenly become unintelligent. He became increasingly convinced that past success guaranteed future success. Sun Tzu warned against exactly this mindset. Every battlefield is different. Every opponent is different. Every decision deserves fresh judgment. Mistake 2. Confusing power with wisdom. Power gives leaders authority. It does not automatically give them better judgment. A powerful person can issue commands that thousands obey, but obedience should never be mistaken for correctness. History is filled with leaders who possessed enormous authority while making deeply flawed decisions. The danger is subtle. As people rise, fewer individuals are willing to challenge them. Praise becomes common. Honest disagreement becomes rare. Over time, a leader may begin believing that agreement confirms wisdom. But wisdom is tested by reality, not applause. Mistake 3. Building echo chambers. One of the greatest threats to leadership is isolation. Not physical isolation, intellectual isolation. An echo chamber forms when leaders hear only opinions that reinforce what they already believe. Advisors stop questioning. Officials avoid uncomfortable truths. Bad news is softened. Good news is exaggerated. Eventually, reality becomes filtered. Abraham Lincoln understood this danger. Rather than surrounding himself only with loyal supporters, he appointed rivals and independent thinkers to important positions. His cabinet contained people who often disagreed with him. This created tension, but it also created better decisions. Lincoln understood that criticism, when offered honestly, strengthens leadership. Sun Tzu would likely have approved. A commander who refuses accurate intelligence places his entire army at risk. Mistake 4. Fighting too many battles. Every leader faces limited resources, limited time, limited energy, limited political capital, limited public attention. The strategist must constantly decide which battles truly matter. Sun Tzu advised commanders to avoid unnecessary conflict. Victory is not measured by the number of battles fought. It is measured by achieving objectives while preserving strength. Many organizations fail because they attempt to solve every problem simultaneously. Many governments struggle because they pursue too many competing priorities. Many individuals exhaust themselves by reacting to everything instead of focusing on what matters most. The strongest leader is not the one who responds to every challenge. It is the one who chooses wisely. Mistake 5. Failing to adapt. Nature offers one of the greatest lessons in strategy. Nothing remains unchanged. Seasons change, markets change, technology changes, societies change. If the environment changes but strategy remains fixed, decline becomes increasingly likely. Sun Tzu compared successful strategy to water. Water adapts to the landscape without losing its destination. It flows around obstacles. It changes shape without changing purpose. History repeatedly rewards adaptability. Companies that once dominated industries disappeared because they failed to adapt to new technologies. Empires weakened because they continued preparing for yesterday's wars instead of tomorrow's. Leaders who confuse consistency with inflexibility eventually become prisoners of their own methods. Mistake 6. Allowing ego to replace purpose. Power often creates a dangerous temptation. The mission slowly becomes personal. Instead of asking, what benefits the nation? A leader begins asking, what protects my reputation? Instead of pursuing the objective, they begin defending their image. Carl Jung warned that people who refuse to confront their inner insecurities often become controlled by them. A leader afraid of appearing weak may refuse necessary compromise. A leader obsessed with legacy may ignore changing realities. A leader seeking admiration may value popularity above wisdom. This is the moment when strategy begins serving ego instead of purpose. Mistake 7. Forgetting that time changes everything. Perhaps the greatest mistake of all is assuming today's conditions will remain tomorrow. Every victory is temporary. Every advantage eventually attracts competition. Every innovation inspires imitation. No leader remains permanently ahead. Sun Tzu never described strategy as a fixed formula. He described it as continuous observation, learning, and adjustment. The strategist must constantly ask, what has changed? What assumptions no longer hold? What opportunities now exist that did not exist before? The leader who stops asking these questions begins falling behind before realizing it. The universal pattern. What is remarkable about these 7 mistakes is that they appear across civilizations, cultures, and centuries. Ancient kings made them. Military commanders made them. Political leaders made them. Business executives made them. Even ordinary people make them. This suggests that the greatest enemy of strategy is not ignorance, it is overconfidence. The final lesson: power does not corrupt every leader, but power tests every leader. It reveals weaknesses that were previously hidden. It magnifies character. It exposes discipline or the lack of it. This is why Sun Tzu placed such importance on self-knowledge. A leader who understands the enemy but not himself remains vulnerable. A leader who understands both has a far greater chance of enduring. Yet history also gives us hope. Not every powerful leader fell into these traps. Some demonstrated extraordinary humility, some welcomed criticism, some changed course when circumstances demanded it. Some mastered themselves before attempting to master the world. They remind us that greatness is not measured only by victories. It is measured by the wisdom to remain teachable even after success. The next chapter examines those rare leaders whose greatest achievement was not conquering others, but conquering themselves. Chapter 9: The Leaders Who Mastered Themselves. Why self-control is the highest form of strategy. If history teaches us why great leaders fall, it also teaches us why a few endure. These leaders were not perfect. They made mistakes, they faced defeat, they encountered criticism, they experienced uncertainty. Yet they possessed one quality that separated them from many of their contemporaries. They understood that the greatest battle is not fought against an enemy, it is fought against oneself. Sun Tzu hinted at this when he wrote, "He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened." While the exact wording is more commonly associated with Lao Tzu, the principle runs throughout the art of war. Before commanding armies, a leader must first command his own mind. This is the highest form of strategy. Abraham Lincoln. The strength to listen. Abraham Lincoln led the United States through one of the most painful periods in its history, the Civil War. The nation was divided. The political pressure was immense. Every decision carried enormous consequences. Many leaders under such pressure become defensive. Lincoln did something different. He welcomed disagreement. Rather than surrounding himself only with loyal supporters, he appointed capable people who often challenged his thinking. Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin famously described this approach as a team of rivals. Why would a leader willingly invite disagreement? Because Lincoln understood something fundamental. The purpose of leadership is not to prove you are right. The purpose is to make the best possible decision. That requires hearing uncomfortable truths. Sun Tzu valued intelligence above certainty. Lincoln valued honest advice above personal comfort. Both understood that truth is more valuable than flattery. George Washington. Knowing when to let go power has tempted leaders throughout history. Many who gained authority struggled to surrender it. George Washington chose a different path. After leading the American colonies to independence and serving 2 presidential terms, he voluntarily stepped away from power. This decision astonished many observers. History had shown countless examples of victorious leaders extending their rule indefinitely. Washington established another precedent. He demonstrated that true strength sometimes means knowing when enough is enough. By leaving office peacefully, he strengthened the institutions of the young republic more than he could have by remaining in power. His legacy reminds us that enduring systems matter more than personal authority. Sun Tzu taught that preserving long-term stability is often wiser than pursuing endless expansion. Washington embodied that principle. Nelson Mandela, the strategy of reconciliation. Few leaders have experienced suffering on the scale endured by Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years imprisoned under apartheid in South Africa. Many expected that upon gaining power he would seek revenge. Instead, he chose reconciliation. This decision surprised both supporters and opponents. Mandela understood that victory achieved through bitterness would leave the nation permanently divided. He sought to build trust where hatred had existed. He encouraged cooperation where conflict had defined generations. This was not weakness. It required extraordinary discipline. Choosing reconciliation when revenge appears justified is one of the most difficult strategic decisions a leader can make. Sun Tzu argued that the highest victory is one that secures lasting peace rather than endless conflict. Mandela's leadership reflected that ideal. Lee Kuan Yew, thinking beyond one lifetime. When Singapore became independent in 1965, it faced enormous uncertainty. It possessed few natural resources. Its future appeared uncertain. Lee Kuan Yew approached leadership with a remarkably long time horizon. He invested heavily in education, infrastructure, public administration, economic competitiveness, rather than seeking only immediate popularity. He focused on building institutions that could outlast him. His leadership demonstrates an important strategic principle. The greatest achievements often become visible decades after the decisions that created them. Sun Tzu consistently emphasized preparation. Lee Kuan Yew demonstrated what preparation looks like when applied to nation building. Marcus Aurelius, mastering the inner world. Not all strategic lessons come from military victories or political success. Some come from philosophy. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during periods of war, plague, and political instability. Yet his private writings, later collected as meditations, reveal a leader deeply concerned with governing himself before governing others. He reminded himself daily that he could not control other people's actions. He could only control his own responses. This is one of the central ideas of Stoicism. External events are often beyond our control. Our judgments, choices, and character remain within our influence. Sun Tzu expressed a similar idea through strategy. A commander cannot control every circumstance, but he can control preparation, discipline, observation, judgment. The common thread: these leaders came from different cultures, different centuries, different political systems, different religions, different historical circumstances. Yet they shared remarkable similarities. They valued truth over praise, purpose over ego, institutions over personality, long-term outcomes over short-term victories, discipline over impulse. They understood that leadership begins with character. Before strategy becomes visible in policies or military campaigns, it exists within the mind of the person making decisions. Self-mastery and modern leadership often rewards speed, instant responses, constant communication, rapid decisions, continuous visibility. Yet the qualities that sustain leadership remain surprisingly unchanged. The ability to pause before reacting, the humility to admit uncertainty, the discipline to reconsider assumptions, the courage to change direction when evidence changes. These qualities rarely generate dramatic headlines, but history suggests they generate lasting influence. Robert Greene repeatedly emphasizes that emotional control is one of the foundations of enduring power. Carl Jung reminds us that unacknowledged weaknesses eventually control us. Daniel Kahneman shows how cognitive biases distort judgment. Sun Tzu ties all of these ideas together. The greatest strategist is not the one who never experiences emotion. It is the one who refuses to let emotion replace judgment. The ultimate battlefield: many people believe leadership is about controlling others. History suggests something different. The most enduring leaders first learned to control themselves. They understood their strengths. They acknowledged their weaknesses. They accepted criticism. They remained students even after becoming teachers. That may be the rarest quality of all. Because success often convinces people that they have nothing left to learn. The wisest leaders never stop learning. As we reach the final stages of this journey, one question remains. What does all of this mean for the world we live in today? Technology has transformed society. Artificial intelligence is reshaping industries. Global competition is accelerating. Political systems are evolving. Has strategy itself changed? Or have only the tools changed while human nature remains the same? The final chapter explores what Sun Tzu's wisdom means for the 21st century and why the lost art of strategy may be more important now than ever before. Frang Chapter 10, The Lost Art of Strategy. What every leader, nation, and individual must learn. And throughout this documentary, we have traveled across more than 2,000 years of history. We have stood beside ancient generals who fought with swords and cavalry. We have examined modern leaders who command nuclear powers, global economies, intelligence agencies, and advanced technologies. We have explored the minds of philosophers, psychologists, historians, and strategists. Yet despite all these differences, one truth has appeared again and again. Human nature changes far more slowly than technology. The battlefield evolves, the weapons evolve, governments evolve, communication evolves. But fear, ambition, pride, hope, greed, wisdom, and folly remain remarkably familiar. This is why The Art of War continues to be read more than 25 centuries after it was written. It is not because people still fight wars with ancient weapons. It is because people still struggle with ancient human problems. How do we make good decisions under pressure? How do we respond to uncertainty? How do we lead without becoming consumed by power? How do we pursue victory without creating unnecessary destruction? These questions remain as important today as they were in Sun Tzu's time. The world has changed. Modern leaders operate in an environment that Sun Tzu could never have imagined. Artificial intelligence can process information in seconds. Financial markets respond instantly to political events. A speech delivered in one country can influence millions of people around the globe within minutes. A cyber attack can disrupt infrastructure without a single soldier crossing a border. The speed of the modern world creates enormous opportunities, but it also creates enormous pressure. Leaders are expected to respond immediately. Citizens expect instant answers. Markets reward rapid action. Social media encourages immediate reactions. Yet strategy has never been about reacting first. It has always been about reacting wisely. Sometimes the fastest decision is the wrong decision. Sometimes the strongest response creates the weakest long-term position. Sometimes doing less creates a better outcome than doing more. This is one of the hardest lessons for modern societies to accept. The crisis of short-term thinking, perhaps the greatest strategic weakness of the modern world, is not a lack of intelligence. It is a lack of patience. We increasingly measure success by today's headlines, this week's polls, quarterly profits, election cycles, viral moments, immediate gratification. Sun Tzu thought differently. He measured success by outcomes, not appearances, not popularity, not temporary excitement, but lasting results. History consistently rewards those who think beyond the present moment. The farmer plants trees whose shade he may never sit beneath. The engineer builds bridges that future generations will cross. The teacher educates children whose greatest achievements may occur decades later. The statesman strengthens institutions that outlive his own career. Real strategy often produces invisible victories before visible ones. The leadership every society needs. After studying history, one conclusion becomes difficult to ignore. The greatest leaders are rarely those who appear strongest. They are those who remain most disciplined. They understand that power is a responsibility before it is a privilege. They listen before they speak. They observe before they act. They question before they conclude. They adapt before circumstances force them to adapt. Sun Tzu never suggested that victory belonged to the loudest leader. He argued that victory belonged to the most prepared leader. Preparation is invisible. Discipline is often unnoticed. Self-control rarely attracts headlines. Yet these qualities repeatedly determine history. The individual lesson: it would be easy to believe that the art of war belongs only to presidents, generals, and governments. It does not. Its lessons apply to every human being. Every one of us faces conflict, not always with armies, but with decisions, temptations, failures, relationships, careers, health, purpose. Every day we choose whether to react emotionally or thoughtfully, whether to prepare or procrastinate, whether to blame others or improve ourselves, whether to seek temporary satisfaction or long-term growth. These are strategic decisions. Our lives are shaped by them. The greatest battlefield most people will ever face is not a political campaign, not a military conflict, not a corporate boardroom. It is the quiet conversation they have with themselves every day. The 7 lessons that endure if we reduce everything we have learned into its simplest form. 7 enduring principles emerge. First, know yourself before trying to understand others. Without self-awareness, every strategy rests on unstable foundations. Second, know reality better than your competitors. Wishful thinking has destroyed more leaders than lack of intelligence. Third, master your emotions before they master you. Anger, fear, pride, and ego are powerful servants but dangerous masters. Fourth, think beyond the immediate moment. Short-term victories often create long-term problems. Enduring success requires patience. Fifth, adapt continuously. The world changes. Strategies must change with it. Rigidity is often the first step toward decline. Sixth, build systems, not merely moments. Strong institutions outlast charismatic individuals. Preparation outlasts improvisation. Finally, never stop learning. The moment a leader believes there is nothing left to learn is often the moment decline begins. Humility is not weakness, it is a strategic advantage. Sun Tzu's greatest victory, perhaps the greatest achievement of Sun Tzu, was not writing a book about war. It was revealing that strategy is ultimately about wisdom. The purpose of strategy is not endless conflict. It is clarity, preparation, understanding, restraint, and creating the conditions where unnecessary conflict becomes less likely. More than 2,000 years have passed since those ideas were first written. Empires have risen and fallen. Kings have disappeared. Technologies have transformed civilization. Yet one reality remains. The leader who understands human nature holds an advantage over the leader who understands only power. And perhaps that is why the art of war has survived for so long. Because every generation believes its challenges are unique, until history reminds us that human beings continue to make many of the same mistakes. The lost art of strategy has never truly disappeared. It has simply been overshadowed by speed, noise, ego, and distraction. The question is whether we are willing to rediscover it, not only in governments, not only in business, but within ourselves, because the greatest victory has never been the defeat of another person. It has always been the mastery of one's own mind, and that is a victory no one can take away.